It's a very exciting time to be a fan of Capcom fighting games. We got the Capcom Fighting Collection in 2022, now we got the Marvel vs. Capcom Collection this year, and next year we're getting the second Capcom Fighting Collection. Personally, these collections have reignited that passion I had years ago. The last MVC game we got was Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and unfortunately, it was a big disappointment. Plug. For the first time in my life, I was not interested in an MVC title. As time went on, all hope had been lost for a new and good MVC game, but that just changed. Not only is Capcom telling us there's hope for more MVC, but they are also bringing back all these long dead franchises. The time is now. We need Marvel vs. Capcom 4. The meat of this video will be about the roster of characters, but I will also slightly talk about other aspects, starting with the visuals. A realistic look is clearly not ideal for MVC. There are three visual styles that I think would be great, starting with Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. Ever since I started playing that game, I couldn't help but to think about MVC. Look at how colorful and modern these characters look. Something like this, but with a little more graphical power, could be really good for Marvel vs. Capcom 4. In fact, in this video, I will be using this game for visual references. The second visual style that I think could work well here is Arc System Works style. These are the developers behind Dragon Ball FighterZ and Guilty Gear, among others. The 3D characters, heavily stylized in a 2D environment, look incredible. This could have an old school feeling while being a modern Marvel at the same time. Last but not least, there's Street Fighter 6's visual style. Although Street Fighter 6 does use realistic graphics, it looks great because it has that cartoon touch, and while that's something more akin to Street Fighter, it could work in an MVC game if they use a more colorful and comic book style. Regardless of which style they go for, I'm pretty sure the game is gonna look great. Capcom's RE engine is just pure magic. I don't really mind if it's 2v2 or 3v3. Personally, I would prefer a 2v2 system, but either one is fine by me. As for the unique mechanic that Capcom always implements in versus games, I wasn't a big fan of the Infinity Stone system for MVCI. I did like the X Factor from MVC3, although I wish they would have toned it down just a bit. So we'll just have to wait and see what Capcom comes up with. I don't really have much to say about this aspect. Now this is the main reason why I made this video. I studied the previous rosters, namely NVC2, UNVC3, and MVCI. I found that male hero or good guy characters will always have the most slots. However, we also need females and villains. I try to have a healthy number of bad guys and girls in here. There are some rules that I set when building this roster. The first rule is, I will try to have as many new characters as possible. I want new characters to have a chance to be in an MVC game. Returning characters will be what I consider staples, meaning they are too popular or iconic not to be in the game. These staple characters are not the same as MVC legacy characters. For example, Thor is a staple character because he's one of the main Avengers, and at this point he is very popular, but he is not a legacy character. On the other hand, Ryu is a staple character because of the same criteria, but he is also a legacy character because he's been in MVC since the beginning of time. Sentinel is considered a legacy character, but he's not a staple. The only reason people liked him was because he was a top tier, but as a character, he's just a regular X-Men enemy with no personality at all, so he won't be here. The second rule is, I will have as much franchise representation as possible, which means I will include characters from as many different games as possible. Third rule, no more than 4 characters per franchise. I don't want to flood the roster with characters from a single game or comic. MVC2 had this problem. They had too many X-Men and Street Fighter characters. Ironically, I had trouble when choosing X-Men characters for this video, so there will be more than 4 of those. However, I didn't go overboard and tried to be as conservative as possible. One thing I forgot to mention about returning characters is that besides the staples, some of them will be here just because at this point their respective franchises are dead and they would only show up in a versus game. Also, some of them will have updated versions from other games, so their movesets and looks will change and they will practically be a new character. Last thing worth mentioning is I won't be dividing the characters into DLCs. I'll just put them all together. Having said all this, let's begin with the Capcom side.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna take you for a ride. No!
Let's kick it off with the staple characters. These are Ryu, Morrigan, Chun-Li, Strider Hiryu, and Mega Man. Ryu and Chun-Li should have their Street Fighter 6 attires. As for Mega Man, well, so far we've seen 3 different versions of Mega Man in versus games. Regular Mega Man, X, and Mega Man Volnet. I think it's time for Mega Man EXE to step into the ring. He has different attacks and transformations that could make him radically different from his other versions. And since we're here, let's continue with Mega Man characters, Zero. Like Mega Man, Zero has other versions, and I think his version from Mega Man Zero should be the one here. This Zero was in a versus game already, but it wasn't a memorable game. This Zero also has different attacks and weapons that will make him very different from the regular Zero. The last Mega Man character in this list will be Baze. Growing up, I used to love Baze. He's a badass, and he could represent the original Mega Man series. He can fuse with his dog Treble and have a plethora of cool moves and specials. Next up, we have the Street Fighter reps. We already have Ryu and Chun-Li as staples, but I'm adding 2 more. From Super Street Fighter 4, we have Juri. I was surprised that she didn't make it into MVC3. Instead, we got Sea Viper, and I'm not complaining. I love Viper, but this time, let's give Juri a chance. From Street Fighter 6, I went with Marissa. Her design is very unique, and I love her moves. She would be a great addition to NVC4. Now let's move on to the Darkstalkers. Morrigan is a staple, as I said before. And then, let's add John Talbane, my favorite Darkstalker hands down. A super badass fighting werewolf with really cool moves is a no-brainer. Lastly, from this series, we have Dimitri. Dimitri has been in other crossovers, but never in a Marvel vs. Capcom. Other than the usual reasons for him to be here, is how cool it would be to see him use his Midnight Bliss to turn the male Marvel characters into girls.
Behold!
Think about that. Next up, we have my favorite Capcom franchise of all time. I think it's extremely obvious who should be the first choice, Leon. As a fun fact, Capcom originally intended to include him in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Leon could have a very unique moveset that does not rely too much on guns. He's a very good hand-to-hand combatant, and also his knife could be a great part of his kit. The knife parry mechanic introduced in the Resident Evil 4 remake could be a part of his moveset. He could parry attacks or have a counter move with his knife. As we all know, where Leon goes, Ada is bound to show up, and MVC4 should be no different. Ada Wong is also a good hand-to-hand combatant. They could use her acrobatics in her moveset, and of course, her hookshot. Also, let's not forget her crossbow. Lastly, I want to add Lady Dimitrescu. We needed a Resident Evil villain, and Lady D is very iconic and special in our hearts. Based on her moves from Resident Evil 8's Mercenaries, she could summon her daughters to attack, smash and slash people, and let's not forget her bad dragon monster form, which could be her level 3. Another Capcom series I love to death is Devil May Cry. Dante could return, but with his updated DMC5 look, which also brings some new weapons and moves. Have you seen the motorcycle? Another character that Capcom wanted for Tatsunoko vs. Capcom was Nero. To me, Nero from DMC4 is very special. It's my favorite version of his, although I wouldn't mind if they go with DMC5's version. Demonic or robotic arm, Nero is still a really good character. The final DMC character is going to be Lady. I think she deserves a chance, and we have a very good idea of how her moveset will be based on her gameplay from DMC4. Let's move on to Final Fight. Cody has never been in a versus game. Last time we saw him was in Street Fighter V, and he's a major now. For the second and last character from this series, I have chosen Guy to complete the dynamic duo. After being in the disastrous Street Fighter Cross Tekken, he needs to make a strong comeback. Power Stone is back, and it's time to have a rep in MVC. There's nobody as iconic as Edward Falcon from this series. He's got the moves and even his transformation. A perfect fit for Marvel vs. Capcom. Another series I want to represent here is Rival Schools. Batsu can make the jump from Tatsunoko to Marvel, and with him, Akira. She was in Street Fighter V, which was a huge surprise. It'd be nice to see her make an appearance in MVC as well. While it was nice to finally see Onimusha representation in a versus game in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, it is now time for the big leagues, and what better character than the OG Samanosuke himself. I think this one is long overdue. Now I'll talk about a dead franchise that I love, Beautiful Joe. Would it kill Capcom to at least make a collection for modern consoles? Well, anyways, I love to see Joe in this game since it's the only way we'll get to see him again, and he fits perfectly being a superhero himself. This time, Joe won't be by himself. I will be requesting Sylvia to join in. But that's not all. Let's also add Alistor into the mix, and we have the Beautiful Joe Trinity. This next character is from a very obscure game, and it happens to be one of my favorite games of all time, Killer 7. In Killer 7, the main character is an old man in a wheelchair whose name is Harmon Smith. Harmon has multiple personality disorder, and hence, he has 7 different personalities, which are 7 different assassins. I chose the one personality that I think is the most unique, and that's Mask the Smith. Mask is a luchador assassin that uses 2 grenade launchers. If that's not an original and badass enough character, I don't know what is. As a fun fact, this is another character Capcom originally wanted to add to Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, which caught me by surprise when I was doing research for this video. However, somehow, Capcom wanted to add the whole Smith Syndicate, meaning all 7 personalities. I don't know how they were going to do that, like maybe switch between characters, or maybe different characters would pop in for some attacks and jump back out. Still, 7 characters seems like a bit too much. Mask the Smith is the last character in this list that was considered by Capcom to be in Tatsunoko. One of the hottest Capcom franchises right now is Monster Hunter, and while I'm not a big fan, there is one character that even I can recognize immediately, and it's the race of cats known as Palico. Every fighting game should have a cute little animal in its roster, so why not? Capcom's classic RPG series Breath of Fire needs to have a rep in MVC4. Naturally, the go-to is Ryu, but I find him to be too much of a general character, so instead I'm gonna go with Folu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Fulu. Whatever. He's one of the coolest, if not the coolest villain of the whole franchise, and the perfect rep for MVC4. One of the series fans want to see again the most is Dino Crisis. At this point, unfortunately, Regina is a fossil just like the dinos she used to fight. Capcom needs to pull a Pokemon and revive her fossil. MVC4 would be the perfect place to bring her back. I think it would be nice if her moveset involves summoning dinosaurs just like Jill summoned monsters and zombies in MVC2, a homage to her figurative older sister. Speaking of dinosaurs, the next character is Hauser from Red Earth. He's a T-Rex dragon hybrid. That's all I can really say about him, and I think that's enough. Also from Red Earth, I want Mai Ling to be here. Red Earth only had 4 playable characters, and all of them except for Mai Ling have been playable in other crossovers. She is clearly inspired by the Monkey King Sun Wukong from Chinese mythology, and it's definitely her turn to be in a new game. A game I fondly remember from my childhood back on the Sega Dreamcast is Plasma Sword. I loved how Capcom had Hayato in MVC2, but now it's time for June to step in. She has a very unique character design and weapons. She has had so many cameos in so many games, she could be considered Capcom's Stan Lee. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. That should change in Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Lastly, on this list, I think Cyberbots deserves a new rep, so I went with my favorite one, Gawain. Just as they did with Jin, they would have to build this character's moveset from the ground, since human characters don't actually fight in Cyberbots because they fight using their mechs. I like his story in the game and his design is the coolest in my opinion. I have 3 honorable mentions that I didn't include in the roster because I didn't really find a place for them, but I still want to mention them. The first one is Heisenberg from Resident Evil 8. I absolutely love this character, and I'm sure Capcom would have a field day making his moveset for MVC4. He has magnetic powers and a huge hammer. The second mention is actually 2 characters as a unit. These 2 are from a game that Capcom hasn't even released yet called Pragmata. There is very little information about the game, but apparently the little girl's name is Diana and she's an android. They seem to fight together in the last teaser trailer they showed, and I think it would be really sick to have them both as one unit in MVC4. The third and last mention is Maximo. Maximo is a spin-off from Ghosts and Goblins. Unfortunately, another dead franchise, but a great candidate for MVC4. We are finally done with the Capcom side of the roster. Now, it's time for Marvel.
My vision. They really did take everything from me.
You set the terms, you can change them.
All right.
As we did with Capcom, let's begin with the staples. These are Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Spider-Man, and Wolverine. Let's continue with the X-Men since Wolverine brought us here. My favorite X-Men that has been dumped for decades in movies and games alike, the scoring leader, Cyclops.
Behold!
I really hope the MCU finally redeems him, and at least X-Men 97 gave him his rightful place again. His moveset could be tweaked a little from MVC2, and a new costume would be nice. I love his Wolverine and the X-Men design, which is also the one used in the Island of Adventure theme parks. Next up in my list is my boy, Gambit.
Come on, mon ami.
He's been making a name for himself lately in both X-Men 97 and in the new Deadpool movie. Just like Cyclops, his moveset from MVC2 could be improved just a little bit. Maybe add a level 3 that could be similar to his Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 Extreme Attack. Capcom has its power couple in Leon and Ada, so Marvel's answer is going to be Gambit and Rogue. Like Psyche and Gambit, we haven't seen Rogue since MVC2. Imagine a match in MVC4 with Leon and Ada versus Gambit and Rogue. One can dream. Anyways, Rogue didn't have many moves in MVC2 and she needs more specials. Her moveset could use a good restructure. Next up, I want to throw Scarlet Witch in here. As we all know, women are always the most powerful ones in Marvel, and we need to get as many as we can. Deadpool is at his peak right now, and there is no reason why he shouldn't be in this game. Plus, we want to see a rematch with Dante. That is all. The last X-Men character is one of the big villains. Magneto carried this weight for decades, but now it's up to Mr. Sinister. Sinister is a very capable fighter and threat. Heck, he could be the final boss of the game. Now let's move on into the darkest corners of the Marvel Universe where the dark creatures lay. Man-Thing is the next character. A relatively obscure character. He was introduced into the MCU a couple of years back but has not appeared again. He can do so many crazy things, his moveset could be very original and insane. Gambit didn't come from the void by himself. Blade is also here. He has many different weapons like silver stakes, swords, a glaive, and guns. He has a lot of tools for special moves. The final darkness in this list is Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes. He's a newer Ghost Rider who has a car instead of a motorcycle. He ain't no Johnny Blaze, but I always like his design, and we can have a Ghost Rider with a new moveset and look. A character that definitely should be here is Daredevil. His moveset from Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 gives us a good glimpse at what Capcom could do with him. He's a very iconic character. It's sad that he still hasn't been in an NBC game yet. Next is the Walking Arsenal, Punisher. I've always been concerned about Frank's moveset since he relies so much on guns. Chris Redfield's moveset in previous games was almost exclusively guns, but Chris isn't here now, so there won't be a problem of having two very similar characters, plus I'm sure Capcom can come up with something cool like the use of a sniper rifle or something like that. Even though she had a Netflix series, Jessica Jones is still a somewhat obscure character. She's got super strength, ability to fly, and she knows how to fight. A good pick for the Marvel side. Spider-Man has a very robust rogues gallery, and that has barely been used for the MVC series. We're putting an end to that. The first Spider-Man villain I chose is Carnage. We all love Venom, but he had his time in the spotlight. Although Carnage is similar to Venom in terms of what he is, he can have a very different moveset, like creating weapons with his limbs. Then we have Dr. Octopus. This one might look like it could be a little weird to adapt into a fighting game because of his tentacles, but they can make it work for sure. And now to bring the Spider-Man character slots up to 4, I'll have to say Kraven. Kraven is a very dangerous and capable villain. He almost killed Spider-Man. I know some of you will disagree with having all these Spider-Man characters in the game, but I think they are all unique in their own right, plus I didn't overdo it by sticking to the 4 characters per series rule. The next 2 characters were actually DLC in MVCI, but I think they deserve a second chance to be in an actual good game. The first one is the Winter Soldier, one of my favorite Marvel characters along with Captain America. He had a very decent moveset in MVCI. The other character is Black Panther. We all knew T'Challa had to be in MVCI. Just like Bucky, I believe he had a very nice moveset, just not a good game, so he needs another chance. I think it's embarrassing that we've never had an actual member of the Fantastic Four in MVC. There has been good representation with Doctor Doom, Clark the Super Skrull, and even Galactus as the final boss for MVC 3. This time, however, I want actual FF reps, starting with The Thing. His design is the most iconic from the Fantastic Four. Here are some of his moves from Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. I didn't want to have all 4 of them, but I don't think the Thing should be by himself, so I'm throwing in Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman. I want to add more ladies to the roster, plus her moveset could be done very creatively. Tried not to bring him back because he's been in MVC enough, but I just couldn't help myself, so Doctor Doom is also in this list. He's my favorite Marvel villain. I know his dive kick is iconic, but just look at his moveset from MUA 3. I think they could rework his attacks a little bit to make him feel a little bit more refreshing.
Smoking sexy style!
A Marvel family that doesn't get much love is the Inhumans. While I like Black Bolt's design, I think Medusa could have a more interesting moveset in MVC. As her name would suggest, she can use her hair to attack. As a second rep, I like to see the villainous Maximus. He can create all sorts of cool weapons to fight. And moving on, let's talk about the cosmic side of Marvel. Guardians of the Galaxy has had Rocket Raccoon in 2 games and Gamora in MVCI. Rocket is my favorite one, but as per the rules I set, I want to give as many new characters as I can the chance. So I'm gonna go with Star-Lord. He can use cool alien gadgets and elemental guns. Quick note, we really need a sequel to that Square Enix game from 2021. It's so good, and I'm not even a big Guardians of the Galaxy fan. Next up, we have Proxima Midnight. I absolutely love her character design. She's a member of Thanos' Black Order, and not only is she a badass, but she's extremely powerful. Something I like to add is that I like to see the other members of the Order in her supers, especially Corvus. Our next character is a very unique one, and that's Howard the Duck. He'd be kind of a joke character, but not really at the same time. Anyways, I don't want that Marvel Champions nonsense of using a robot to fight. He knows Quack Fu, and I want to see it in its full glory. Another character I like to see in MVC4 is one of Captain America's deadliest foes, Baron Zemo. His champion's moveset gives us a hint of what they could do with him. He uses guns, but he's best at using his sword. As we are about to reach the end of this list, let's have one last powerful female character with Moonstone. She's a very powerful villain and a little obscure, but nevertheless a good choice in my opinion. She's basically an evil Captain Marvel. And now, my last Marvel character, and keeping the obscure character thing going on, the Black Knight. NVC games always have obscure characters, so these are my picks. The Black Knight is super intelligent. He knows how to fight and has a mystical armor and sword. Honestly, what I like the most about his character is his costume. Just look at that badass armor, and he even wears a cool leather jacket. That is the end of the Marvel side, but as with the Capcom side, I do have honorable mentions, and these are Null and Warpath. Null is a very powerful entity in the Marvel comics. He is the creator of all symbiotes and has the Necro Sword, which can kill even gods. He will be in the next Venom movie. Let's hope they do him justice. As for the other character, Warpath, I've always wanted to see him in an MVC game, but I think it's very unlikely due to his obscurity. But you never know. Shuma Gorath and Blackheart made it, so everything is possible. I didn't add him to the actual roster because he's another X-Men character. That's what the ideal roster would look like to me. And to summarize, we have 68 characters, which admittedly is a bit too much, but I had fun with all of it, so it's all good. With 19 females and 16 villains, I think it's in line with previous rosters more or less. If you watch until the end, you are a true OG. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave me a comment with the characters you would like to see. I will reply to every single comment. Marvel vs. Capcom 4 is no longer just a long forgotten wish. It is very possible, and it's only a matter of time. Capcom will surely learn from their mistakes, and now Marvel won't have any restrictions with X-Men and Fantastic Four characters. It could be the greatest NVC. Time will tell. Until next time.